Have you just started playing Legends of Runeterra and have no idea where to start with deck building? Or are you a returning player for set 2 and want to be talked through some of the new decks? If so, this is the video for you. Welcome to Top 5 New Decks for Legends of Runeterra. The first deck we're looking at today features Lee Sin and Vi. The aim of the deck is to spam cheap spells very aggressively in a tempo-driven spell synergy style. It is an aggro deck which will involve you playing very fast to reach the end of the game before bigger opposing cards can start to be played. It is likely to be strong against combo decks, but weak against midrange. As you can see from the image on the screen, almost all the spells have a mana cost of 4 or below, really helping you to spam as many of those 22 spell cards as possible. Claws of the Dragon is a new 2-cost card which can be summoned from your hand for free after you play 2 spells in a round. You should have a decent number of cheap spells, so this is a free power, 2 health card which will give you a great bit of tempo. Another 2-cost is Eye of the Dragon, which summons a Dragling if you cast 2 spells in the previous round, once again fitting in line with the theme of the deck. Another card in this deck is Chump Wump. Take advantage of Mushroom Cloud's cheap spell cost alongside spell synergy cards like Lee Sin, Deep Meditation, or Eye of the Dragon. Lee Sin gains keywords as you cast spells. The first spell you cast grants him Challenger this round, whilst the second gives him Barrier. After you've cast 7 spells in a game, he'll level up and gain Dragon's Rage. This ability lets him kick an enemy into their own Nexus, striking both and recalling the enemy if they both don't die. Chief Mechanist Zevi is the most expensive follower in the deck and is a highly value-orientated card. It gives you an extra copy of each card you draw and gives it fleeting. It's often best to refuse attack with this card and keep getting the value until your enemy takes it out with their own resources. This deck features Draven and Twisted Fate. It's a very aggressive deck that uses the new Power 6 mana cards to close out games very fast. Like the Lee Sin deck, it's also an aggro deck, although it's slightly easier in difficulty to use. This deck contrasts the last deck as it revolves around followers with a total of 29 in this deck. As you can see from the image, there are only 5 spells and almost half of them have a very low mana cost of 2. Interestingly, the boss card for this deck isn't actually a champion, it's Aurak Glimthorn. As it's quite hard to set up, the aggro style of this deck builds up to it, allowing you to use it to its maximum potential and pretty much setting up a win condition. It is an extremely powerful card which allows you to stun all of your opponent's cards that are damaged every time it attacks. Please note that this effect cannot be prevented when Glimthorn attacks, so the stun will instantly occur and there will be no chance to block with these cards. Aurak Glimthorn works perfectly with Twisted Fate's red card, which damages every opponent on the field, and Make It Rain, which damages 3 of your opponent's cards randomly for 1 damage. Reckless Trifarian fits fantastically into this deck, as you'll be able to hit the Nexus more frequently due to the stunned opponents in the later part of this deck's game. It can also use its high damage to take out Golden Narwhal, which is summoned to the opponent's side of the field when you summon a hunting fleet. Reckless Trifarian has a respectable health of 4, which can be topped up through Citrus Courier's Plunder ability, which will activate frequently due to the aggro nature of this deck. This deck also takes advantage of the new keyword Vulnerable through cards like Hired Gun, where you can quickly take down your opponent's strong cards by targeting them with all the damage that this deck brings. Spider Aggro is a deck you would have definitely seen before and will most likely see several variations of in the future. Of course, it relies heavily on Elise, but it can slot into other regions and champions, giving the archetype a little bit of spice. This version of the deck focuses more on buffing 1-cost allies, which obviously includes all cards which revolve around spiderlings. Like lots of other spider decks, the mana cost in this deck is generally very low, with almost all cards sitting in the 1, 2 or 3 mana cost section. In this deck, you're trading out the Noxus spider synergies for Fizz and a whole bunch of the Bilgewater's aggressive tools. When Fizz upgrades, after you've cast 6 spells this game, he is able to upgrade to an even more powerful version. You get a Chum the Waters spell in hand for every Nexus strike with leveled up Fizz, meaning you can spend 4 mana for 5 power, 1 health Longtooth with Overwhelm, as well as giving the enemy unit vulnerable to let Longtooth attack it. Jagged Taskmaster's Plunder ability grants 1 cost allies everywhere plus 1 power. This may not seem great, as it only applies directly to Fizz and Bark Beast in your deck, but it also affects the 1 cost spiders summoned by everything from Elise to Crawling Sensation. Like the original spider themed deck, Frenzy's Skitterer can force your opponents into being unable to block fearsome units. Reducing their attack to below 3 could open you up to a bunch of strong attacks, as well as buffing your own spiders by 1 power. This works perfectly with Elise's leveled up ability, where all spiders gain fearsome and challenger. The aim of this deck is to get deep super quick and hit for huge heavy damage in the late game. You'll have access to Morkai early in the game to start snowballing the amount of tossed cards, which should set you up with the deep condition nicely by the time you have enough mana to summon Nautilus. This deck has an extremely high number of expensive cards, with 9 having a cost of 7 or more, so you'll struggle against decks that hit early and quick like Elusive. The toss process should start from turn 1, and you'll be looking like cards like Dreggers and Deadbloom Wonder to start off this process. Both of these cards toss cards when summoned. As you approach mid-game, you will access your first sea monsters, Abyssal Eye and Devourer of the Depths, which should keep this deck competitive until you reach the later parts of the game. They both have the deep keyword, so this would be a valuable part of your late game as well, once they have that stats boost. Zap Sprayfin is a fantastic card, and you will always draw Lure of the Depths as it's the only 3 cost or lower mana spell. Lure of the Depths is a card that Sea Monsters is built around. On average, you will draw 2 of these a game, really lowering the cost of Sea Monsters and helping that bridge that gap to late game. Alternatively, you can replace this with Jettison if you really want to focus on the toss keyword instead of purely going for the Sea Monsters archetype. You'll be aiming to finish the game with cards like Shipwreck Hoarder and Terror of the Tides will be seriously hard to take down, especially when deep. This deck is all about playing out your minions, while Swain or Sejuani, ideally both, are on the board watching as they gradually ramp up in power. This is why there's a high number of followers with lower costs in this deck to help aid a smooth ramp to this point. Sejuani is particularly crucial here, as her frostbites and vulnerable keywords can cause serious pain for the opponent if they don't deal with her. Plus, this deck has plenty of ways to make the enemy's life even trickier, as ways to buff allies to help them stick on the board, as well as crafty methods of hitting the Nexus no matter what. Crimson Disciple is a relatively low cost card and has pretty beefy stats. This card's ability works perfectly with Swain and will be a core part of this deck. Use the likes of Transfusion on her and you'll gain astonishing value. Imperial Deologist is great here if you've already got something on the board which will benefit from its unique ability, dealing 1 damage to an ally to deal 2 to the opponent. When used on Crimson Disciple, it can be a super easy way of dealing 4 non-combat damage. Legion Rearguard can't block, but is a great offensive card that you can use right away, and should force the enemy into using resources to deal with him when they'd rather not. This card is purely here to help you have a strong early game to help ramp to the mid-game peak you're aiming for. Your win condition with this deck involves having a leveled up Sejuani frostbiting all your opponents, or Swain stunning enemies every time you deal non-combat damage with your other cards, including City Breaker and Leviathan, which are basically designed for decks like this. Sit back and watch your opponent's Nexus drain health without making a move. This video is just a quick look at some early decks that I thought would be suitable in the new meta. However, it's too early to say what will be the meta at this stage. I will do an updated version of this video when I have a clearer idea of what kind of cards are really standing out. My question of the day is, what is your favourite new deck? Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.